How's that?
Hi.
Hi. Can you hear the toddler in the background?
No?
Good. That means noise canceling is doing well, because in fact, he's watching a show and eating his chicken nuggets.
Buddy. Uh-oh. Rubbing our eyes. That's not a good sign.
He had a busy day.
Okay.
Don't shake your head, no. I was going to go upstairs, but my partner in crime is not home yet. And she had just walked into Walmart when I talked to her about 5 minutes ago. So I actually forgot about this meeting and planned on going to Menards tonight. Well, I remembered about 11:30 last night. I was like, oh crap, I can't go to Menards tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I literally went through and looked up washers and bolts and nuts and created a giant shopping list and sent her all the links and everything for her to get stuff for the chicken coop tonight so we can finish getting it put together.
Nice.
Yep, we'll have chickens this weekend, hopefully. Are we got a Bok Box in the Bok Bok house? No. Why not? Do I need any of this anymore? Can I just close this all? Nope, 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 nope.
You need to get you think Dave will join logged into the account?
Yes.
Okay. I don't somewhere I have the host passcode, but be damned if I know where it is.
I accidentally logged in as it. I had to log out of Zoom and log back in as my regular account. What was interesting though is it said I was signed out and signed in on another device. So I don't know why it would let me log in as the host.
It still will. I've done that. For some reason, it'll let you log in multiple places.
But I wasn't logged in.
America.
This guy's in food coma over here. This chicken nuggets. Did you nap today? No red light? He went to the library today.
Oh, neat.
Yep. They had story time at the library today.
So Ollie told me that she hasn't been getting voicemails or email and doesn't know how to check her phone.
Yeah?
I changed her username Memorial Day weekend.
Maiden name?
Yeah.
Divorce finally went through?
Yeah.
Okay.
So she hasn't been getting voicemails for a month and didn't seem to miss them.
They're not important. That's just great. So she's still living with her daughter?
No, her daughter sold her house here, and she's living with Ollie in Florida.
Oh, God.
But she does travel nursing, so she's.
Oh.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that then. Stupid booger cam. I love this laptop. I hate the location.
You need to get a stool to put your laptop up on.
And it's still a booger cam.
Yeah. Because then you'd be looking up at it.
So to get it to where, well, yeah, I have to look above the screen. It always makes me look like I'm looking over everything. I'm not looking at the camera anymore.
What the hell? Why did they do that?
I think it's to save space. And honestly, I think it's cheaper. One, they're not running cables up the side of the bezel anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably cheaper manufacturing because they don't have to have a specialized machine that gets that cable in behind that screen and then put the screen on it. If one of these companies would just like find a way to put a camera in a Pixel, looks out at you.
Right. Do a whole punch screen like Samsung.
There you go.
I'd consider it.
Have the notch like Apple. Look at that face.
That was great. That's one for the high school yearbook.
Correct. So I picked out one chicken. I'm hoping we can find it when we go back. I didn't get a picture of it, but it was completely black, the whole chicken, but around its neck from like the head of the chicken down had these like red feathers, almost like inlays.
Mm-hmm.
It looked just stupid cool. This is Jen's favorite chicken she's getting. Oh, nope, not that one. She wants, what the heck? Oh, there it is.
She's all excited about that one.
Yep. I forget what it's called. I think it's called a barred chicken or something like that. No, I'm like sitting here like he's like trying to show me the chicken, and I'm trying to dodge the chicken so I can get his face in the picture. Oops. And then try to get one that didn't look like he was strangling it.
Don't want to be choking the chicken.
Correct. I'll just sit here like this the whole time.
Dave.
Hi, Dave.
You guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Justin, what are you doing with your phone?
Booger camera.
Oh.
Like this is stupid. Look at this. I have this thing on a table, an elevated table, you know, all the way up in the height. Oh, maybe I can go up one more. Oh, I can go up one more. And I still, like, it's so far down.
Yeah, I still don't understand why they do that.
The only benefit of having it up here like this is if I keep my fingers on the keyboard, you can't see them because the screen is so far back. I don't understand it.
Well, my headset is dead, so.
Good job. Must have been a busy day.
Well, it's Cisco Live, so I've been on conference all day.
Oh, I don't. I just turn the speakers on at that point. I don't.
Yeah, well.
If I'm not talking. Yeah. And even then, like this morning, like during like the last two stand-ups we've done, well, not today's, but last two, I didn't have my headset. No one seemed to complain about anything.
No.
So, uh-oh.
Anyways, I'm using the conference phone thing.
Nice.
Not using
one
the camera.
Oh, one second. I got the wife calling.
Gosh, too much stuff open.
Bobby.
Hey.
Hey.
How's it going?
I'm good.
Pretty. Is this home office for you?
It's home disaster. That's what it is. It's a little bit of everything. It's my desk at home.
How hard I can tax this laptop.
I think you just need shelves for like your cars.
Yeah, I do. There's more. There's one way over there too. And you can
I'm
see the bus
working from the
speaking up.
living room couch right now, so.
Ah,
My wife's not home yet, and someone's feasting on chicken nuggets.
nice.
Munchkin Land.
It looks like he's gonna go to bed early tonight because he is awful tired.
It's interesting. It's not giving me the presenter view option.
Is that because you didn't connect his Fort Wayne?
I did. Let's change my name. Oh,
What are you trying to do?
yeah, it won't do the presenter view on PowerPoint.
Oh,
Oh, never mind.
how many?
I thought you were talking about Zoom.
How many monitors do you hooked up?
5.
Okay, desktop or web version of PowerPoint?
Desktop. It usually does. Maybe it's.
Okay, go to the slideshow tab.
Yeah, and the presenter view is grayed out.
Grayed out.
No presenter view. Yeah, there's no option for that.
The hell?
Maybe because I have so many folders.
Or if you've done like the activate
Yeah.
or the enable whatever.
It also won't go full screen. It's in a window.
You've ran out of GPU cycles. Your poor GPU is like just yelling at you and crying.
No wonder. So I've also got VMs running.
It's having a mental breakdown.
Not too bad. GPU's at 35%, CPU's at 43%, memory's at 47%. Good deal.
That's not doing anything yet.
Yeah.
Bill Kindle with the fresh haircut there.
Yes. You like it?
The fresh fade.
Yeah, I finally got the COVID cut turned off.
Oh, nice.
It's really weird getting a haircut wearing a mask.
Ooh, that'd be odd.
Yeah, that was an interesting experience.
I just cut my own hair.
Clip your
That
mouse.
explains a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So what's everybody looking forward to right now?
For my wife's chicken coop to be done so I can move on with my life.
Good luck with that. It doesn't end with a chicken coop.
I was gonna say
It'll be
that's where you
expanded soon.
start to have to shovel chicken shit.
Oh no, I bought her only one shovel today.
Does that one shovel have your name on it?
It does not.
Not yet.
I already told her, I said, they don't get taken care of, they're becoming soup.
Nah, the highway will take care of them.
We're not free ranging. We have a
Oh,
caged run. We had a neighbor a mile down the road who started last season with like 25 chickens, and he now has 0.
why did the chicken cross the road? Well, no. No, they're not around to tell the tale.
Our chickens cross the road because the neighbors put food out in their yard.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
When I had the ones I had when I was a child, we think either coyotes got them or neighbors' dogs got them. Always came home and found a pile of feathers in the yard, and one or two chickens fewer than before.
Nice.
That's incredible.
Justin, I got that host to come back up.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, turned off the system and did a cold boot again on it, and it booted up just fine. So I think there might be some hardware issues going on with it, and that's probably why it's not in service anymore.
Probably not.
You get free servers from work, you never know what you're getting.
Ryan, is that actually your wall or is that a virtual background?
That is a virtual background, my friend.
Oh, okay.
See, well, here, let's see.
It looks pretty good.
Yeah, I know.
Thanks you for reminding me because I need to do that myself.
You have a green screen?
No.
See,
Wish I did,
there.
though.
I zoom out. Zoom out. Does that make sense better? Oh,
That's
see,
great.
Why didn't it work?
high quality iStock photos are the best.
Oh,
thing for
you
imaging.
really do have a green screen.
Oh yeah, I've
So
got a
you
green
have to have a green screen, yeah. Otherwise your chair.
It worked.
Yeah.
It works somewhat well if you have a solid background behind you because you can choose the color in Zoom, but green screens really are the best.
I'm trying to find that option, and I don't appear to have that.
It's under your stop video if you click the little arrow.
Yeah, you can choose virtual background. And like Justin, you would be fine because I would do choose virtual background and then choose the color, and you can use that probably that gray background that you have your wall. You probably choose a color, and it would.
There we go.
Justin Jones, not Brant. There you go. That'll work too.
Just a little slow pulling that up.
Cuts off my face. It's hilarious.
Yeah, but if you get the green screen, it does a really good job.
Oh, here's the one I got. I need this one.
Oh, there you go.
Green screen would work if I was up in my office maybe, but my wife's not home yet, so I'm on toddler duty.
Oh.
Hey, buddy, how's it going?
Yeah, he's not paying attention.
Yeah.
He's engrossed in Peppa Pig, I think.
You have audio in your headset too? So you won't hear it. Is your audio going through your headset too? So
Yeah.
you probably won't hear you anyways. Yeah, but
Oh, man, it zoomed out too much.
So, what interesting projects is everybody into these days?
Still working on a Meraki upgrade.
Oh no.
What do you mean, no? Replacing hardware in remote offices. It just kind of took a break for a little while. Going to Canada next week. Apparently IT is essential, so we can get past the whole border thing.
Are you flying
Where
or
are you
driving?
now?
I'm going to Calgary. I am flying.
Just checking.
Because who are you with now?
Back at DMA.
Yeah. Is there an office in Canada?
Yeah, we have a Toronto office, London, Ancaster, and Calgary. So we have 4 offices.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
You get Calgary. Who gets London?
I do. In another
okay.
few weeks or months.
Okay.
Who knows? Yeah.
That's good for you to see those offices, though.
Yeah, last time I was in Calgary, I learned about the Calgary Stampede. I didn't know that was a thing. Apparently it is. If you don't know what the Stampede is, it's basically a big rodeo. So everyone's walking around in cowboy hats and boots, and yeah, it's pretty good.
Calgary is kind of like the South of the United States, right?
It's like Texas. It's weird.
It's very weird.
Which
Yeah.
goes along with Texas. So
Oh, hey,
Alright,
there's an
yeah.
option to touch up my appearance. Cool. Can make me less ugly.
What's the Instagram filter on? So somehow my controller managed to disable her Wi-Fi card on a Dell Latitude E7240. I'm wondering if there's a switch on there somewhere.
We're just going to stick with that for now.
It's not like function print screen, is it? Because that's what it is on my laptop to turn it on and off.
I think there's a physical switch on this one.
I mean, I've never turned my Wi-Fi adapter off by trying to take a screenshot because my screenshot's control print screen.
new feature key.
It's a good thing you've never done that then.
Oh, no, never. I've never done that before. Are you gonna fall asleep eating chicken nuggets?
That'd be hilarious.
He just looks exhausted. Now, granted, he hasn't gone to bed on time in the last, I don't know, 5 days, so that might have a play into it.
So has anybody done any projects that they would want to present on?
I can present on VMware tools. It seems like it's my life right now.
How's that been going? I've been seeing your Slack messages about it.
Every time I think I get close to getting done, VMware releases another version of it, and David goes, "Hey, you need to update that."
Ay, Dios mío.
Sanctum sanctorum. Nice job, David.
It's not me.
Just said
No, I'm
David.
talking about your background.
Oh, that. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if we actually have difference of opinions, but I have the opinion that I think VMware tools should fall under the guidance of the people who own the VMs on updating them with their VM updates, because then it would fall into their maintenance cycles. But that's just my personal O2.
But then they'll never be updated.
Right, I was going to say that would never happen.
Actually, on VMware tools, we had actually some customers that were wanting to push the latest version of VMware tools, and actually there was a VMware knowledge base article. The recommendation from VMware is to use the packaged VMware tools that's from the OS distribution and not to update them. And that's actually documented in the knowledge base.
Correct, and we run about a month behind on our ESXi patches, roughly. So we're pretty much up to date with them.
Yeah, but no, I know. I mean, what they're saying is, what they're saying is if the OS vendor, so if like Red Hat doesn't want VMware tool, doesn't have in their mainline distribution, doesn't have for like 6.x, they don't have the OVF, the tools aren't upgraded. VMware doesn't recommend that you put their version of tools on if the underlying OS manufacturer provides tools.
But the issue was there was a security flaw, right?
Well, but this is only on this is pertaining to Windows. So I'm not really doing anything with the Linux environments right now because I follow the same philosophy as what you just said. If the mainline doesn't distribute something,
yeah,
I don't want to.
Okay. Yeah, if you're in Windows, yeah, I'm sorry for you in a lot of aspects, not just.
No.
Yeah, we have some Linux stuff, but I'm not the Linux guru. That's true.
Growing all the time. All right, we're just gonna wait a couple more minutes and then we'll do more than chat. But I like chatting, so maybe we'll do it longer.
Does anyone diversify their clusters in here by separating out Windows clusters and Linux clusters?
What would be the advantage of that? Just licensing, of course.
Licensing, natural dedupe of processes, Windows licensing mostly as well. That's the reason we ultimately did it, is we broke down our Windows licensing so that only certain hosts have Windows licensing.
Yeah, and we license by host instead of by the machine itself. Not
It's
every
an option now, isn't it?
I don't know. We've been doing it for a long time, so.
God, that would hurt as a re-up if they take that option away.
Yeah,
we do something similar, but for SQL specific VMs, they all live on a certain cluster for licensing.
Hi, Ben.
How does our Oracle licensing work with our hosts? Do we have to license all the hosts?
With our licensing, not exactly. We have a special license for it that's through Fiserv that has a special agreement with Oracle. So we get our licensing from Fiserv for Oracle.
Yeah, I knew that. I just wasn't sure if they were like, oh, only certain hosts or not.
Yeah, so we are supposed to limit it to specific machines that it can run on. We just haven't done that for a long time because we only have 2 in each data center, and they only run on 2 hosts, so I don't see the big deal. But
Well, they live in the Linux cluster now, so
right, so
they
which
are kind of limited
anyway.
to 2 hosts.
Yep. So. So, did everybody have a chance to look at the notes for Phil's presentation for later?
Absolutely.
Follow along?
Can you drop in the chat?
Sure, that's probably a good idea.
Yeah, I put the last commit on that repository just a little bit ago, actually. I made a couple of last minute changes to the PowerPoint, but I also learned today that the PowerPoint I uploaded actually hit GitHub's file size limit. So I was like, oh, so.
Oh, well, what's in it?
I got 2 videos in it that I recorded, and I actually trimmed the videos down, but I had everything bunched up into separate little videos, but I combined them all just to kind of let it flow a little bit better. So I actually have them separated into kind of like an initial installation and basic configuration, and then we jump into the Zabbix UI in part 2.
It's actually interesting, well timed, because I think my PRTG maintenance expires soonish, and all I'm really using it for is testing to see if VMs are up, or if some VMs are up, and if my VPNs are up.
Yeah, Zabbix is very, very powerful, very customizable. You can scale it really easily. It's a very, very good monitoring platform. It's a little daunting at first, but everything you want to know is actually in the documentation. It's just a matter of going through, reading it, and then playing around a little bit to get it, tuned to the way you want it. So what I'm showing is basically how anybody can take the platform just literally by downloading it, putting it on a Linux host, and within, I think I timed it at about 6 or 7 minutes, you can have everything up and running that you need. Now, 6 or 7 minutes is, granted, if you already have a like a CentOS, Red Hat, or Ubuntu VM spun up. And we're also going to skip the firewall configuration, but the firewall configuration is kind of a non-issue. There's only 3 ports you got to open up, and that's based on whatever your web server port's on, and then the 2 communication ports, which are 10,051 and 10,050. They're both TCP ports, so you just open them up, allow them global, and whatever port you want your web server to run on. So you can do 80, 80, 88, whatever, or 443. You just have to make sure you open it up in the firewall.
Cool.
But yeah, the entire platform is all free open source software. So you can use Nginx or Apache. You can use Postgres, SQL. You can use MySQL. So it's really just depends on which one, whatever database engine you're comfortable with. And then, of course, you got the Zabbix server, but all the components are all modular components. So you can customize things a little bit on how you want them set up. You can even go so far as to actually separate the components out onto different VMs, which gets kind of tricky. But we've done it at IDEMIA, and I've actually separated MySQL out onto its own host, and basically to get it set up on a high availability cluster, which in all honesty, that gets really tricky and kind of hard when you don't have paid support from MariaDB or Oracle. So,
right.
I was going to ask if you guys did much as far in the way of experimenting with the different configs, or if Zabbix offered recommendations based on your size and I guess expected log size.
Could you repeat that again? I kind of caught the first part of it. You broke out a little bit.
Sorry. Basically, what I was trying to ask was if you've done much experimentation with the different databases to see if there's a benefit from one over the other, or is there just a Zabbix recommendation that you guys kind of went with?
The default,
or did you just go with whatever you're familiar with?
Yeah, that's what actually Zabbix trainers will actually they'll tell you to use what you're familiar with. So if you've got staff that's more familiar with Postgres, then use Postgres. If you've got staff that's more comfortable with MySQL, then go with MySQL. It's the performance. The performance. You start to get into really like nerdy discussions, and some database administrators will start to show a little bit of bias toward one to the other. But I haven't seen too many glaring differences from a sysadmin standpoint. So it's one of those things. Go with what you're familiar with.
Okay, cool. Nice and flexible.
I tend to find that it's easier to find MySQL support. Whether you're using Oracle's MySQL or using MariaDB's version, which you'll notice a lot of the Linux distributions are actually using MariaDB because it's upstream from MySQL. So I tend to like MariaDB myself anyways.
I mean, is it really intensive on the database? Is it, it's not banging on the database really hard with a large number of checks, or is it?
No, it really depends on how you architect it. Because from right out of the gate, you don't have anything actually being monitored. So you have built-in templates that are there that already have pre-configured items that are all set up. They all have their items. They don't have tagging or anything like that, but you already have like macros set up. It's looking at certain data points on a host. But you can go in and you can create your own template. So if you don't want to use the stuff that's built in, you got a little more setup that you'll have to go through and do. But you can get as complex or as simple as you want. So if you only want to perform one check on one item, that's not going to do anything to the database at all. It's literally, you can go with the default installation and have everything on one host and monitor, I think, up to like 500 or 600 hosts with a single VM. It just really depends on how much data you're actually pumping into it. But there's performance checks and stuff that you can do that automatically get put on the Zabbix host when you're in the Zabbix web front end that you can look at, and you can kind of see where your server performance is at and make adjustments based on recommendations in the documentation. But usually for most environments, you can hit the ground running with just a default install. You don't really have to do too many tweaking to it. Yeah, but
I guess maybe the question I was really asking is it using the database to maintain state of what the service checks are doing, or is it just like when it fires up, it just loads the configuration and it's just using a kind of persistent configuration there? It's there because it really comes down to, is it constantly doing write backs to that every time it does a service check to get the latest, put the latest performance metrics or things of that nature?
Yeah, so it kind of comes down to what kind of checks are being done, because you've got active checks and then you've got passive checks. So the passive checks, I should have wrote that down. There are two different checks that get done. One of them, actually, the server initiates the check, and the other one basically is just it's waiting for an interval that is accepting information all the time. You kind of get into where you can have a proxy offload some of that stuff from the main server, and a proxy will sit and just collect data, and then at a certain interval, it'll just basically push a giant chunk of data to the database.
Okay, gotcha. So that has remote pollers then.
Yeah, you can do. Okay. Yeah, it works off of pollers, so you can actually. In the demo, you'll actually see where I enable VMware pollers, and by default, you just enable 5, and those are just 5 little processes that are running on the Linux host that are going out and just saying, okay, I'm free. What's the next check or data point that I need to pull from that host? And it starts doing its thing and pulls data in. Again, you'll see if you ever need to add more pollers, that's when you look at the Zabbix performance or the server performance, and you can see whether you need to add a couple more pollers to kind of help the performance a little bit or not.
Okay.
All right. Before we get started with the other, Nicholas had a question in the chat. Is there better support for either CentOS, Red Hat, OEL versus Debian, Ubuntu?
Again, it goes back to use what you're familiar with. I'm using Ubuntu in this demo. Personally, I I like Ubuntu when it comes to using as a like a web server and database server. I also like CentOS or RHEL. I've seen it put on Fedora server as well. I mean, obviously because it's, you know, ultimately it's still a RHEL-based distribution, and so is Oracle Linux. We at IDEMIA use Oracle Linux Enterprise, mostly because of regulatory reasons. We had to have the unbreakable kernel. I'm not really a huge fan of Oracle Linux, and that's because of the fact that when you have to do some updates to certain components, they don't have those components readily available in their Oracle repositories. And I've found that those repositories often lag quite a bit behind, in some cases even worse than CentOS. So I like to try to stick with, you know, the latest version of like RHEL or Fedora server, or just use a Debian based distro like Ubuntu. And stick to LTS releases. Don't try not to go with the in between point releases.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. So we have our basic agenda that everybody knows we always follow. So we do have some gift cards to hand out at the end. So make sure you stick around. If you use your video, you get an extra entry into the drawing. So for those of you without video, if you have it available, you turn it on, you will get an extra drawing or entry for the, we're giving away 2 $25 gift cards. And where to will kind of be a choice. So if there are, we'll have to order them. It gives us some flexibility in what we give out. So just a couple announcements. I'm sure there's more than this. I didn't spend a lot of time searching for things, but our next meeting will be July 15th. So it falls a little earlier in the month. It is still the third Wednesday, but still a little earlier than what it usually is. Also next Thursday, week from tomorrow, is the Indie VMUG UserCon. It's going to be virtual. There's a link there, which I should probably copy and paste into the chat. Yeah, they won't let me. All right, well, I'll get you that link. The next couple of slides are from this, is actually this blog that I just posted in the chat. Hands-on Labs for VMware, they released some new hands-on labs for vCenter 7 and vSphere 7. Sorry, not vCenter, vSphere. So take a look at those. The hands-on labs are free, so you're able to go out and take those. So there's, I think it says there's like seven hours of lab. Oh, sorry, 3 hours. There's this in those labs. So not a whole long time, but get some experience and gives you an environment that you don't necessarily have to follow the lab guide. It's totally your lab, so you can go in and run scripts and do whatever you want against that, against those labs to test things. So, so yeah, so that's out there. If you haven't messed with hands-on labs, it's a good way to get in and get some experience with things and test them out. They also just released the VMware Cloud Foundations for hands-on lab. So that's out there as well. VMUG Advantage, remember to keep the code Fort Wayne 20 in mind if you go to get that, or if you go to renew, get a 10% discount. And then it also gives us credit towards a VBeers at sometime in the future. If we're in the top, I don't know, it's top 2 or 3 groups. I can't remember how many for sure. There's this quick slide on the Advantage membership. I need to stop looking at that one and look at this one. Benefits. So mainly the eval experience. So I think most on the call have it. So nothing there, and definitely regular. So I talk about it every month. All right, so that's all I had to do for the intro. They're pretty brief. Does anybody else have any questions or anything we want to discuss as a group? Get everybody's feedback before we turn it over to Bill. No.
Dude, I had a question at the, but I can probably wait until the very end. It was about PowerShell and monitoring and stuff, but.
Okay, yeah, maybe Bill may end up answering your question during the thing. So if it's
Okay.
if it's
Yeah,
on that, we can save for the end, or he may answer it for you. So as we're going through.
Yeah, I've got time blocked out for Ian for questions, so I'm ready to try to answer, or at least let you know that I can get back to you at the end. So ask away.
The one thing I did not ask is, or mention is, if everybody's knows about our Slack. I know most on here are in the Slack channel. There's a couple, I'm not sure if you're in there or not, but if you're not in there and you want to join, then just let us know and we can get you invited into there. So
okay.
There's a lot of discussion that goes on in there, and some of it's VMware related, some of it's not. It doesn't matter. It's not all tech related either, but a majority of it's tech related. But yeah. So anyway, so it's a great place to connect with each other and sometimes get quicker answers than going and trying to find it online or trying to find it through support somewhere. So all right, I guess I need to figure out how to make Bill a presenter. I meant to do that earlier before.
He should be able to present by himself, I think.
Okay.
Yeah,
He just shares.
Set up now. All right. Which one do I want here? All right. Making sure. I'm not seeing an option for just a particular monitor, or is that under advanced? We've only got content from second camera. Okay, well, let me try to make sure that this will work. Full screen my presentation and go back.
Yeah, it is weird. I don't know why they don't do it by monitor.
All right. Okay, if everybody's got their conference call bingo cards out, can you see my screen? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Which
Yes.
one, the PowerPoint or full screen PowerPoint?
Wrong one.
PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Bingo on that.
That's not the one I want to share. Why is it not letting me? All right, well, let's try this. Aha, there we go. Move the Zoom window to the second monitor and it suddenly says, oh yeah, you can share this screen.
Hey.
All right.
There we go.
Okay. Are we ready?
All set.
Okay.
One thing before you get, sorry, Bill,
All right.
is if everybody could just mute the mics or whatever, but one thing that you can do, or maybe not know, but if you're muted and you want to talk, one thing you can do is hold down your space bar button and it unmutes you temporarily while you're holding down the space bar. And then you can let up and it'll remute.
Did not know that. Cool.
Right, good. Sorry.
All right, everybody. Well, thanks for joining us this evening, and I hope that you'll get a little bit of information out this that you can take back to your environments and be immediately effective with monitoring your ESXi hosts with Zabbix. I've titled this presentation Enterprise Grade Monitoring on a $0 to $3 budget. So we'll go ahead and move on. Some of you know me. I'm not sure if everybody has heard of me before, but my name is Bill Kindle. I'm a systems administrator. I'm also a contributor to the PowerShell Conference books, Volume 1, and an editor for Volume 3. That should be out later this year, early next year. I blog from time to time over at adamtheautomator.com. Just had an article published recently about using SSH and OpenSSL with a PowerShell 7. So if you get a chance to read about that, if that interests you, be more than happy to have some extra readers. I'm really big into model railroads and trains. That's something I do as a hobby on the side, really get into that. I'm the father of 2 small children. I like to refer to them as sticky little people that don't pay rent, but they're adorable. I absolutely love them. And I'm a husband to a loving wife. Like I said many times before, that I'd be completely and absolutely lost without. So enough about me, though. Let's go ahead and get started with Zabbix here. So some of what I'm going to cover in this presentation is what exactly Zabbix is, talk about some of the system requirements. We're going to go through a recorded video of installing Zabbix Server. Again, that does not cover the installation of the OS. However, if you look at my notes, it kind of briefly touches on that a little bit. But we're going to be using an Ubuntu 20.04 LTS release for this demonstration. You also see how we do the initial configuration of the Zabbix server. And then we're going to set up a single ESXi host in Zabbix that we're going to monitor. That host is actually in my home lab right now. And the server is actually just to my right-hand side. I've got a few VMs already spun up on it. So you'll see all of that already pulled in. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some minor tweaks that you'll want to do that are not default, that'll actually make things go a little faster. Not necessarily stuff that you want to keep in place long-term because, again, of performance issues if you leave it that way. Going back to the whole thing that I mentioned earlier, defaults are usually perfectly fine when using Zabbix. We're going to have a short discussion on what the difference is between an item and a trigger. They are exactly what they sound like. An item is a single data point on an endpoint that you're looking at. So say if I'm looking to see just basically if the VM's up or down or powered on or off, that's an actual single item that you're looking for. You'd base a trigger off of the value or what's the word I'm looking for? Not necessarily the configuration, but that's kind of what it is, the item that you're looking at. So based on that. Last not least, we'll go over some of the training options. I'll talk about some of my experience actually having gone through the paid Zabbix training course. Got lots of good things to say about that, but I'll hold on to that till the end of the discussion. So we'll go ahead and move on. I've mentioned earlier, the goal of this presentation is that you'll walk away with enough knowledge that you can immediately start monitoring your ESXi host and the VM guests that are contained within. So that's the ultimate goal walking away from here. Again, if you have any questions or, think you might need some help with this in the near future, feel free to reach out to me or go ahead and ask at the end and we'll see what we can work out. So here's some of the systems and tools that we're going to be using for this demo. We are using the latest and greatest Zabbix 5.0 long-term support version. They do have point releases that come out on a regular basis. I believe it's every 6 months, so they're kind of similar to how Linux distributions like from Canonical's, Ubuntu, Fedora, how they release about every 6 to 8 months or so. We're using Ubuntu Server 20.04. That is the latest release from a Canonical. I'm using a VMware ESXi 7.0 host. Thank you, vExpert program, for providing the software and licensing for that. We're also going to use PowerShell 7 and the Windows terminal. The reason why I'm using that is because I didn't really want to have a bunch of extra SSH utilities on my Windows box, and PowerShell 7 natively supports SSH remoting now. So yay for that. We're also going to use a basic text editor, and on Ubuntu, we're going to use the built-in Nano editor. For some of you, if you're more familiar with VI or Vim, those tools can be used too. You basically just would need a text editor on your Linux distro, which should be there by default on most installs. The other notes and material, like I said earlier, and that David also put in the chat, you can find that on my GitHub link. And I do have a QR code at the end of this presentation that you can scan to get direct access to that if you want. So what is Zabbix? Zabbix in a nutshell is the free, open source, and scalable, customizable enterprise grade monitoring and alerting system. And that's what it does. And let me reiterate that it is a monitoring and alerting system. It is not a report system. It doesn't have a lot of pretty graphics like you would see with Grafana or like Prometheus and things like that. However, you can integrate Grafana directly into Zabbix and make those pretty dashboards and reports if you want. You can make some of your own customized dashboards in Zabbix, but you kind of got to do a lot of your own graphics work, and it gets kind of tricky. If anybody's interested in seeing some of those sometime, let me know, and I could take some screenshots of some of the ones that we have that we use at my current employer. Okay. Someone asked earlier about minimum system requirements. Believe it or not, Zabbix has always had an absolute minimum requirement of 128 megabytes of RAM. I did not stutter. I'm not on drugs. That is actually the physical memory requirements. It's almost like a blast from the past when you see that. And disk space, it only requires 256 megs of RAM to be free to run. I've seen people put these on Raspberry Pis and run just basically, the Zabbix server part itself, and they'll put the web front end or the SQL database off on another physical or virtual host. So it does run quite lightweight. I wouldn't necessarily recommend using these specs, but that's just basically so you know that you can, if you're that constrained, you can run a small instance on very, very few resources, which is nice. This sizing chart's actually available using the link below. I went ahead and took a screenshot of it just so I could show everyone that Zabbix is very versatile, even as a virtual appliance. And that's actually how I'm running it in my home lab right now. And actually how I run some pretty large deployments right now. We pretty much run them all as virtual machines, or we have them hosted in Azure or AWS. So you can see here, just a small deployment, which they consider 100 monitored endpoints small. They're using a virtual appliance. You can have a single core processor added. You can have 1 gig of RAM. It'll run. It might not run fantastic all the time, but it will run. And basically the more memory you give it, more CPU, the better it runs, obviously. It's just like any other application. I usually default to the medium installs, even for small instances that I do, just because I want that performance. So I usually always start with 2 CPUs and 2 gigs of memory. You can give it anywhere from, like we saw on the previous slide, 256 megs of free disk space, or you can give it a couple of gigs. It really depends on a lot of little factors, like how long you want to retain data. So if you perform checks, every hour, but you need to keep 6 months worth of data, you'll have to size your storage based on that, because your database will grow, and it doesn't necessarily give any of that free space back. So once it gets to a certain point, that's the size. So I usually like to start out with, at least 100 gigs worth of, disk space just for the database to allow it to grow. And after that, you kind of just got to pay attention to how much data you want to keep. So all of that information, again, is provided in the link that I've got listed below here. So let's go ahead and talk about installing Zabbix 5.0. And again, this is going to be about a 6-minute walkthrough. We're going to watch the video, and I will explain what's going on step by step. So as I said earlier, we're going to use SSH to remote into this machine using PowerShell. So I'll go ahead and put my credentials in. And if any of you have already installed Ubuntu straight from the ISO available from Canonical, you'll notice that basically your root account is the initial account that you created. So in this instance, my username is the main root account. So we're going to go ahead and begin with adding the repository directly to the system. And we're downloading all that from Zabbix. Next, we're going to unpackage the repository files, but I screwed up here and we needed to use sudo. So we'll go ahead and rerun that command using the, okay, and I'll add my password back in. And we'll go ahead and install that. So now I'm going to do an apt update to update my repositories. And you'll see that now we've got the proper Zabbix repos listed. And now I'm going to go ahead and install the different components. So let me go ahead and pause for just a second here. You'll notice that we've got a SQL Server, the web front end, and the agent is what we're installing. So that all is installed now. And now we're going to go through the MySQL setup. Now, I added some notes in the markdown files that you'll find on the repo that talk about this a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and build a blank database. And we're just going to call that database Zabbix. Next, we need to create a user that can connect to that database. So we'll use that Zabbix at localhost. And the password there, you can, if you're familiar with MySQL, you can actually change that to whatever you want. But we left it at password for simplicity reasons. And then we'll grant all the privileges to connect to that database. And once we've done that, we can exit. And we have our blank database. Next, we actually are going to import the database schema that we get from Zabbix. It's got all the tables already created and all that structure. So we're going to basically copy that over our blank database so we have that ready to go for Zabbix to use when we do the post installation. Now your screen will freeze at this point for a minute or two while it's importing that schema, and that's normal. So next we need to go through and we need to do the initial server configuration. I'm going to do a couple of things in this step where we're going to look at the Zabbix, or not the Zabbix pollers, but the VMware pollers. So we're going to do a Control-W to do a quick search. And the first item we need to change, we need to add the database password in that we had previously. So that database password is going to be, what did I make that? I need to watch my own video again. Yeah, so it's the password. So it's kind of odd how that's named. You would think that that database password was the password to log into MySQL, and it's not. That's actually a common place that I end up screwing up every time I go to reinstall because I forget that point. But not a DBA, so I'm not that hard on myself. The next thing that we're going to do, we need to enable the VMware collectors. By default, those are not turned on. They're all commented out. So we'll do a search again and go down to that option. And we'll uncomment start VMware collectors, and we're going to change that value from 0 to 5. The more pollers that you have, the more data it can ingest. But for right now, 5 pollers is plenty. And I'm also going to change a few other settings here. By default, the check frequency is every hour. So if you want to ingest data in faster and not wait a full hour, you can change that VMware frequency to the minimum of 10 minutes. You can also do the same thing for the performance frequencies. But again, leaving those at default is usually suggested. I also changed my cache size to 32 megs just so I can keep more data. But 8 megs, again, usually is plenty. Now, on some of these, with all of them except for the first one, the polars that we enabled, the rest of these, as long as the polars are enabled, it doesn't matter if you uncomment those or not. If you leave them commented out, they're going to go with the default value that's there. So it'll leave the VMware performance frequency at 60 minutes. The cache size will stay at 8 megs, and the timeout will stay at the initial value that it had. So we save that configuration, and now we just have to basically restart the service, the Zabbix Server service, or daemon if we want to use more Linux lingo. So we'll restart that daemon, and we also have to enable it so that it'll survive reboots. Think of it as like auto start on Windows. So once we do that, that's pretty much it. You'll see that we have the 5 VMware collectors, processes that are running there, and the service is active and running. So let's go ahead and proceed. Now we're going to set up our Zabbix server that's fully configured and operational to manage and monitor a ESXi host.
Hey, Bill.
Yeah.
So I was following along with you here, and I got to the point where you imported the SQL tables, and I get an access denied for it. Does that need to be sudoed? I missed it in your video.
Yes, you'll want to run that as sudo.
Let's see if I can.
Yep. Because the username and password that it's using, you'll see like it'll say at the end of it after the pipe, you'll see MySQL, and it'll say use Zabbix and then P Zabbix. That's the username and password for the schema that you're importing. So it actually connects to that schema first, and then basically copies the schema to the new database that you just created. So you leave that username and password alone. You don't have to do anything to that.
Gotcha. And when it asks me to enter my password, I'm entering the password of my sudo user, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because you're making a connection to your MySQL. You're making a connection to your MySQL server, not the database. And like I said, that's a common pain point right there. And I actually brought that up to the Zabbix trainer that I spoke with in January. And they said they're trying to modify their documentation to be a little more clear on that. But that's actually a common pain point that they hear about. And it's not something that they control per se. It's all, MariaDB, MySQL that handles that. So it's just their documentation. You kind of got to know that beforehand. Because if you don't, it can trip people up. It trips me up. Like I said, I constantly do that, and I have to, do a face palm and be like, well, you've done this enough, Bill, you should know. But I forget. But I'm not a MySQL DBA, so.
Is anyone else following along having that issue as well, where it just access denied for the user?
I haven't seen anything else come up in chat, so.
All right. I'll circle back around after you get done presenting with it.
All right. So real quick, there was a couple of Zabbix lingo items I wanted to touch base on, and that's an item and a trigger. You're going to see these two terms used quite a bit. And especially if you start to do a lot of administration work, you're going to be working with these on a regular basis. Pretty much everything you do in Zabbix is going to be an item. And if you want to get an alert on it or perform some kind of action, you're going to see the word trigger used quite a bit. So this is, again, direct from their documentation. An item is just a piece of data that you want to receive off of a host. Or, in simple terms, it's just a metric. So in this case, what we're going to look at a VM, a guest VM that's on the ESXi host, and I just simply want to pull the data and see if it's turned on or off, and that data is just a 1 or 0. So the item is basically that particular metric that we're looking at, basically the VMware power state, and the value that we're looking for is just a 1 or 0. And that trigger fires based off the value that's received from that item. And then you can take that trigger and you can perform actions against that trigger value and whatnot. So I went a little bit farther here. So the trigger is a logical expression that defines the problem threshold and is used to evaluate the data received on items. So what I was just saying, basically the trigger is looking for whether that item is matching a 1 or a 0. And it changes that into an okay or a problem state. Hi, everybody. Say hello to my son, Liam. He decided he needed to get a puzzle. So I have to keep that stuff away from him from time to time because there's also crayons back there, and he's turned my walls into an art gallery. But okay, so yeah, the trigger is basically looking at that item value and saying, okay, you know, is that value expected? If it is, okay, I do nothing with it. If it's not, then I trigger a problem, and with that problem, I can perform an action if I want to do so. All right, and we'll go ahead and do a demo here. This is recorded, but I've got my live environment set up too, so I can share that here in just a moment and we can begin answering questions. So I'm going to go to my IP address for that VM, and it's just the IP address /Zabbix. And if everything's been configured correctly, you'll be dumped out to a page like this. We'll go ahead and click on next step. And the prerequisites, a common prerequisite that will be missed here is the PHP time zone. That's a separate edit that you'll see in my notes that you have to make to basically have the Zabbix server recognize what time zone it's going to be operating in. We'll go ahead and configure our database connection again. So the web front end needs to know information about the database. So we're just putting our Zabbix user and password for password there. It does do TLS encryption, so if you've got that enabled, you can actually select that as well. And here the name is completely optional. We're just going to give it a friendly name though and just say it's Zabbix host instead of showing up as localhost. Excuse me. So this is the post-installation summary. You'll see that everything's there, all the port and everything. And at the end, it's just saying, hey, here's your configuration file. You can actually make a backup of that if you want, and it contains all that information that we just put in here. And we'll click finish, and here we go. We'll go ahead and log in with our default username and password, which is just admin and Zabbix all lowercase. We'll go ahead and sign in. And this is the brand new Linux dashboard. They completely redesigned the UI. So if anyone's ever familiar with the old dashboard, you'll notice that all the links and everything are now on the left-hand side by default instead of sprawled across the top. They also implemented, I believe, a new graphics engine too, so things are a little bit smoother, more modern. So let's go ahead and go to configuration hosts, and we're going to create a new host. And we're going to go ahead and enter our host name. Now, if your ESXi hosts have fully qualified domain names, you can use those here. I'm just going to leave mine at the IP address and give it a visible name, which is just going to be a friendly name that we see on the dashboard. And then we're going to add it to a group. And I'm going to select the templates /virtualization group. And again, these are all built-in templates. So we don't have to create anything to monitor our VMware systems. We just have to make sure that they're in the basic template. And then I can go up here to macros, and I need to tell it how to log into my ESXi host. So there's only 3 macros that we have to worry about here, and that's username, password, and URL. The URL, we're just going to point it to the IP address of the ESXi host and just /SDK. It's my understanding by default, the SDK should already be installed by default. If it's not, you might have to add that to your host. Just a little FYI. So we go ahead and we assign our username macro, give it the value of root. Now this is something new for Zabbix 5.0. It used to be that when you put that value in there, you were basically showing your password in plain text. So now you can actually hide that. So if you're not a Zabbix admin, you don't see that password. So I went ahead and selected that hide password or secret text, and it changed that option for me. And that's something you'll see across the entirety of Zabbix 5.0 now as well. So anytime you have a password or some kind of secret that you need to put in there, you can actually change it from text to secret text now. So we're finally just adding the URL, and after that we hit add. And our host has been added. So I've time-lapsed this a little bit, so it's went ahead about 10 minutes, and we should start getting some information here soon. One last thing we need to do in order to get information, though, we have to add some templates that have all the items that we want to monitor. So what I was doing right there with the interface, just leave that default. You don't have to change that. So we're going to go ahead and go to items. And again, we don't have anything being monitored on this pre-built template, so we need to add some item templates. So we'll go ahead and we're going to link a couple of templates here. One of them I chose by mistake. I chose 2 templates, but you really only need the one, and that's just the templates virtualization. And you're going to see that there's 3 different templates you can add here. Really, you only need to add the template VMware one at the top. You don't have to do the guest. The guest is actually for the host, the guests that are on the host. I don't know why I selected both of them. It was just was recording late, and I guess I chose both of them. But there should be about 10 to 11 items for that particular guest and VMware template. So you'll see here we've got everything from memory size to event logs, CPU usage, cluster names, if it belongs to a cluster, and all those items are enabled. So again, when I was saying earlier that if you didn't want to have some of those, you can actually just click on the enable and disable them, and that'll cut down on the amount of information that's coming in from those particular hosts. But you can see here that it already pulled all the guests that are on that particular host. And in this instance, I wanted to go ahead and I wanted to monitor some things on this particular VM guest. So I'm going to create a trigger, and I'm going to tell it, I want to know if this VMware workstation is powered off or not. And we'll go ahead and add an expression. And since we're using templates, we don't have to manually program any of these. So I'm just going to go down and select power state. And I want to know if it's on or off. And we know that off is 0 in this instance. So I want to make sure that said, if it's equals 0, then we're going to throw an alert. And I can change the severity to anything from if I don't know what it's going to be, I can leave it at not classified. Or if I want to say, it's information, warning, average, high, or disaster, I can select that here. So in this case, what I'm going to do, I'm going to just add a description, and then I'm going to change it to informational, because that particular VM, I just want to know if it's been turned off. I don't want to throw, a warning or disaster message or anything like that. So we'll select that, and I'll click add. And this is the trigger that's added to this particular host. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run some live test on it. I'm going to turn that VM guest off through the host interface, and we should see an alert here on our dashboard momentarily that will start showing that hey, there's a problem on that host. It's detected that it's down. So I believe at this point in the video, I turned the guest off. So we'll give it a second or two here, and there we go.
What kind of polar cycle does this run on? Is this a 1-minute polar, 30-second polar?
Again, it's one of those items that you can configure. We'll take a look at that actually here at the end. I can show you where some of those settings are at in the templates. So you'll see here, right now it's alerting on the dashboard that, hey, there's a problem on that host. So we can actually drill down into problems, and we can, we can tag, or we can select different tags. We can select different host groups. But in this case, since I've only got one here, I'm only going to see that one. And since I turned the VM back on, you'll see that it automatically resolved that alert, and it's gone from the dashboard now. So we're back to no problems. And that's pretty much it. We're monitoring items that are on that ESXi host, and we're monitoring the status of the VM guests that are contained within that host.
Is your disaster high, average, that kind of classification structure, is that baked into the product, or is that a definable thing?
That is a definable thing. So you can actually you can change the colors. I believe you can change even the wording that it uses. But this is just all defaults that it comes with. We use at IDEMIA, we use all of the defaults anyways, but we've built other actionable items based on what kind of alert level it is. For the most part, I base my monitoring off of some of the other products I've used. So I usually only look at informational, warning, or disaster. The average and high, really that just depends on if you want to use those or not. So when you're defining your trigger, if you only want to, have a specific alert be a warning or a disaster, meaning that it's completely offline, then you can just set those in your triggers. You don't have to worry about the other two options. So let me go ahead and advance my slides here. And we'll go ahead and talk about some of the more ways you can learn about Zabbix. They do offer paid training, but they have really good forums, and the documentation is pretty good. They've got everything from the original Zabbix, I believe 1.0, all the way up to 5.0, and 5.1, I think, is what they're starting to work on now in their new dev cycle. So if you ever have any questions or need to know about what a specific macro does, the documentation is exactly where you want to go first. And believe it or not, the manuals page can be a little clunky to search at times, but if you know what you're looking for, you can simply go to Google and type in, the macro name that you're thinking you need to look for, followed by Zabbix macro, and it will usually dump you straight out to the exact page on their wiki that they have. I found that it's a little bit easier to search that way than it is to go blindly through the actual manuals page. But it's that way for a lot of documentation. I mean, I use the same technique when I'm searching docs for Microsoft as well. But again, both of these are excellent resources. I use the forum quite a bit myself. Usually get pretty good interactions on there with people straight from Zabbix or some of the Zabbix certified trainers and professionals around the globe. As mentioned, they do have paid support plans. Their support is actually really good too. They've got multiple tiers that you can purchase. Some of the tiers actually offer you engineering services. So if you just want to have somebody, from Zabbix, take a look at your environment, and you just tell them, say, hey, here's the items I want to monitor, build me a solution. They'll actually do that for you as long as you pay their support plan. So they also have phone support, email support with different tiers. But the engineering services, if you want to do a large scale deployment, is definitely worth the money talking directly to Zabbix engineers and developers. All right, questions. Like I said, got plenty of time, I think, to answer anything, or we can do live demonstrations if need be.
Have you ever used it to monitor networking, SNMP type stuff?
Oh yes, you can do that. I actually have a pfSense VM that's running on my host right now that we can go right through that. So let me switch screens here. Oh, go back. All right. Stop my screen share for just a moment and switch over here. All right.
while you're doing that, if we could also talk about security in the future.
Say again?
When we're through the networking side, I'd also like to ask about some security stuff.
Okay.
How you're managing those passwords for the endpoints and such.
Okay. So right now, you're staring at a live Zabbix instance that I am actually running on my my laptop here using Hyper-V. Let me log back into my host. I'll show you some of these VMs I've got running. I've got my pfSense firewall for my lab. That services all the other virtual machines here. I even have another Zabbix server running in that environment that I was able to set up with HTTPS. So I'm not going to turn that on at the moment, but I have hosts there that we're going to take a look at, and I can show you how you can do more monitoring. So let me go back to my Zabbix dashboard. So where was I? Yes, we wanted to monitor the pfSense firewall. So go ahead and we'll click on that host and we'll go to configuration. And I've already got it added to some groups here, but let me go ahead and go to items. Okay, see what I've already got here. All right. This will be a good time to show you some of the things too that weren't valid for this particular guest. These disk discoveries, you'll see sometimes you'll get a notification that says it's not supported. And that's just basically because either the counter is not there or there's some other kind of problem with that check. In this instance, we're not going to disable them or anything because it's not really affecting the problem. But if you get into a large environment and these are not being disabled or cleaned up, that can start to cause your server to have a performance hit because it's trying to check things that aren't going to return a value. So you've got a little bit of a delay there while it's trying to buffer and wait for a response. So just a little tidbit of information to know about there. But you'll see we've got other items that are being pulled in. So let's go ahead and look at we can look at memory size. And this particular item, you'll see that we're looking at, we're logging into that VM through the SDK, and we're using the macro that we assigned earlier of username and the password. And speaking of your security question, that's actually how you hide some of that information from view. So you have other macros that are set up in the administration panel that have that assigned as secret text. So if you're not an admin, you're not going to know what that information is pointing to. But you can actually go down through here. You can change the update interval. So right here, we're actually just kind of using the default interval based on the configuration. So it's, let's see, that macro, let's go to administration, general, where did I put that? I'm drawing a blank now where I go to define my macros. Let me skip that for a moment, but that is actually, that is something that you can change. So we'll just leave that alone for now. Back to configuration, hosts, and hosts, there we go. So if I wanted to pull data from that piece of equipment, this is all the information that's being pulled from that guest right now. So you can see that, the CPU usage is only running at 27 hertz or megahertz, excuse me. Got about 78% disk space free. What's this other information I have here? It's powered on. You can see, what kind of memory usage it's using, all those metrics. If you wanted to pull a graph, you can click on graph here and you'll see real quick why I said it's not, they're not really pretty graphs, but they work. You'll see here that I haven't had any ballooning memory issues since the data's been collected. Let me see if I can go out, see the last 1 day. I should have a little bit of information there, and nope, I don't.
Once you look at like CPU usage or something like that, that probably has some variability.
Yeah, let me go back here. Yeah, so see, there's been a change in plus 21 megahertz, so we should have a little bit of a spike. There we go. So you'll see some of the collected data there. Now, you'll notice too, sometimes on some of these graphs, you'll have a chunk where there's like no line or anything like that. And that either means that the host was off, there was no data being collected, or some other problem was going on in that window. But I've had this on for the last couple hours, so we should have some data there. So see, there's a missing chunk here where my host was off, so obviously there's no data. But you can kind of tell when everything came back online. I turned everything on at about 3 o'clock this afternoon. So where was I going with that? Oh, yeah. So we wanted to monitor that, make a trigger for, if it spiked above a certain CPU level. So let's go ahead and select that host again. And let's go to configuration. And go to trigger. And we'll create a new trigger. And I'll say, I want a warning message, and we'll just call this high CPU usage. Okay, and we'll add an expression. And since we already have a template applied to this, we should have some items with conditions already available to us. So we'll go ahead and say that's our CPU usage. Yep. Okay. And we can say the most recent value. Let's change that to, what do I want here? So you'll see we got different functions we can change to. So not everything will be like a last most recent value. So you can say, I want to know the average value over a period of time. We can change this to, let's see. I'll just put 28 in there and we'll see what happens. And time, so we'll say the last 3 checks. So we'll say last count. So what that does a rolling total. So it'll wait and it'll check that value 3 times. And if it's, average is equal to 28, then it should kick off something on our dashboard. So you're wanting to know how often that's being checked. Well, if you come up here, let's go ahead and add this real quick. And we'll go up here to the item. And our interval, right here, that's the value I wanted. So we've got 7 items with an interval. And let me look here. Interval, where did I see that? I know I've got that here somewhere. GUI, there it is, macros. So it's under Administration General drop-down menu. So you can actually assign your own macros here. So if you had like an SMP community string, you could change that here, and you can say, okay, this is a system-wide macro that I'm going to use, and it can change that to secret text. So again, if you're not a Zabbix super admin, you can't even get to this page. So there is a little bit of security built into that. You just have to set it up. So let's go to value mapping, trigger severities. Yeah, somebody asked about if you could change your classification. So yeah, here's where you would actually do that. Again, you have to be a Zabbix super admin to change these. So I can change not classified to, let's say I don't know. You can change information to FYI, warning. We can leave that there. These are all required values, by the way, so you have to leave them there. But we can change this disaster to, oh my God, everything's burning. Everything is on fire. And you can actually change these colors too to whatever value you want. So if you wanted it to be a bright red, you could change that. If you wanted your information to just be kind of a cool, cool color, we could do that as well. So let's go ahead and update that. And now if we go back to our configuration, go out to our host here, I can say I want to do some configuration here. I want to add a trigger. Let's see here. Create a trigger. We're going to create one that is, oh my God, everything is on fire. Data store missing. And let's go ahead and select an item condition. And let's see, storage. Okay. Total size for a data store. And we'll say, we'll just leave that at 0 for now. I'm going to try something here live. I'm going to actually pull a drive from my server to see if I can get this to actually fire off a warning. So data store missing. Just go ahead and leave it there. Go out to our dashboard and hold on.
This is what Justin Brandt was holding a demo.
All right, I just killed one of my data stores. So let's see if it actually fires off something here.
Don't judge me. You definitely wanted to make sure that alert worked.
Yeah,
Doesn't matter as a production server.
I just pulled 2 drives on a mirror set, so something should be broke. And since I'm not seeing anything yet, that's because I misconfigured it. So go figure. Let's go back to hosts. See if we can find some current data. So we'll go to latest data. And yep, only one of my data. Well, there's the other data store. So graph. So it doesn't appear to have made that check yet. Okay, last hour. This might be one of those things too where it takes 10 minutes for it to actually show up. Since that's the quickest we can check this particular host. Well, anyways, I can change that. Let's go back to the original VM so I can show you that we can change the host severity there. So we'll go back to that. Oh, yep, there we go. There's one problem. I was just not impatient. So let's go to problems. Yep, there it is. So I had a missing data store. It found it. Duration's been 35 seconds. Now that data store is spinning back up, we should see this problem resolve itself here soon.
Hey, so where are these kinds of configurations stored? Are they in the MariaDB or are they in what's configurable via the config file versus through here?
Well, these settings are all in the database. So you can actually, through the Zabbix API, you can make calls to look at certain settings. Which that brings up a good point. Let me go ahead and switch over here real quick. Let's see.
Because yeah, I was kind of dovetailing into like Ansible type stuff.
Here we go. Go to Zabbix API. So yeah, you can actually make calls to all these API methods and get return data off of anything. So if you were looking at a particular, like say, this configuration, let's go here. That should go away here soon. Let me go back to hosts. All right, so take note of this URL up here. So you'll notice that like everything like host ID, that's actually the data that's in the database, the MySQL database. So if you were using an API call, you can say, okay, I want to look at host ID, and then I want to look at, let's see, we'll go to the macros page. You can actually get all of this information based off of the table that's in the database. And I wish I knew a little bit more about MySQL to make an actual connection to dig down into those database tables, but without using an actual third-party tool to visualize it, I'm not going to be able to answer that at this time. But I do know it is possible. I've seen it happen. I just don't know off the top of my head how to dig into that. But I do know that you can do API calls, and you can pull pretty much anything that's in the database out with a simple call. They did have a, let me go back here. They did have a really good blog post on this. So let me go ahead and grab that URL, and I'll put that out in chat. Let's see here. Oh, where did my chat window go here? There we go. Chat, Alt H. Okay. All right. But there's actually a video too, I believe, on YouTube that actually shows you how to use the API as well. But this little guide right here will actually get you set up to pull all that information out. And as an example here, if you wanted to get a list of hosts, they're doing this as a Perl script. I've seen it done with Python a lot easier, but you'll see that it actually will pull out everything out of that MySQL database table, and it will show you all the hosts in some objects that you can use in a PowerShell script or use in a Python script. However you want to ingest that information.
Is that read only, or can you actually also push config in via API?
You can push a config in as well. So if you wanted to update a host item, yeah, you can create Python scripts to go in and manually update those items. So you don't necessarily have to come into the Zabbix UI to add this kind of information in. As long as you know the location, what table it's in, and can write the code, you can actually inject your configuration changes directly, arguably a lot faster than what you would by going through and clicking through the UI. Again, there's YouTube videos that show you how to do that en masse. So if you need to make a change to a lot of hosts all at once, their recommendation is actually to script it and use the API to make those changes.
Hey, I also saw this thing. You have it's called like event correlation. What does that really do or mean? Or I'm assuming what there is a parent-child relationship, but
yeah. So you can have like say if you're building like an application stack, you can say, okay, if these two items have a problem out of like 3 or 4 different items, you can consider the whole thing down. We have a couple of event correlation rules set up in our environment for a couple of pretty critical web scenarios that if it's just a single service in a stack of services, but the most important one, if it's not working, the entire stack is down. So there might be a bunch of child processes that are running and they could still be up and running just fine. But if that top service is down, the whole thing's down. Now, if it's reverse and one of those sub processes is stopped, the service is just degraded. So you can actually use an event correlation rule to say, okay, if that's the case, then, it's not necessarily a, oh my God, everything is on fire alert. It's more or less like a, hey, here's a warning, your service is degraded. You might want to go check that out. So you can set up your conditions to do different things here. So you can have it do operations. So if there's, if an alert gets generated, you can say, hey, just close anything that's old, but leave only the newest one. So if you have a bunch of alerts that get generated from one failure, you can actually have it, take care of those other events for you. That way you're not, getting a flood of alerts to your dashboard.
Flapping, you mean, or something like that?
Yeah, like flapping, or, using the web stack example. So if you had, 2 or 3 services in that entire stack, you don't have to get alerts for all of those. You can just say, hey, if all these 3 are showing a problem, just show me one alert and go from there.
Yeah. There's also an area where you showed the timeline.
Yeah.
I think I had looked at Zabbix some time ago. Is this the one that has a time? They have a timeline feature of like alarms. If you could actually line up what happened.
Yeah. So let me go back to that here in just a second. So yeah, you can do in this event correlation, you can do things by tags. You can do them by host groups, event pairs. There's all kinds of things you can do with this this particular event correlation rules. So timelines, yes. If we go back to monitoring, if you go to your problems view, we can actually go to the history here. We can say, okay, show me everything that's happened. I can say, okay, let's just go ahead and apply that view. And let's say show timeline. So right now, everything that we've got, let's do problems only, age less than 14 days. Let's see if I can find more than a couple. So that's one. Let's do particular host groups. Say everything on virtual machines. I was hoping that it had that there. So, you know what? It actually might have changed that since I don't have those names there anymore. So it probably changed, and that's why I'm not seeing it in the timeline.
Yeah,
So
it's showing timeline. Yeah, because it's showing timeline as there's a checkbox over there.
Yeah.
Okay. I was just curious on what that.
Yeah, it's there. I think when I changed the severity names, it actually messed up what I had, because you can see the problems. It'll list everything out, both the recovery and the problem status.
So you mentioned Zabbix has like an open source component, and then they have then they also do commercial. Is there a different product set? I mean, is this a community release and then a commercial release, or do they just offer support and support services around their one product release?
Yeah, they offer support services around the one product. So it doesn't matter if you buy support or not. It's free, open source. You can go out and look at all the source code. You can contribute to the documentation. You can customize it. So if there's something you don't quite like about it, you can go in and you can take their code, fork it, change what you want, and go on about your business. I don't know specifically how that affects their support, but I'm assuming as long as you got everything documented and you can tell them what you've done, they can still help out. But let me go to their support and services and kind of show you what they have. So they've got 5 different support plans now. They actually did not used to have this global one plan. It used to be basically just silver, gold, and enterprise. So they've actually added a couple of different levels to their support. So you can see here, just like with the cheap silver plan, you have to request a quote from them. I can tell you that one of the quotes that we got for a company our size, based on the deployment that we had, They quoted us, I think it was around $56,000 per year. But that gave us, I want to say that was for the enterprise level support. And as you can see here, they'll do, emergency response. They'll give you, an hour and a half that they'll call you back and help you out. They guarantee a 4-hour response time, and they're always available. But you get unlimited support with them. And that pretty much is the same, from the gold plan on, except, with the gold plan, you obviously don't have the emergency response, and you've only got 2 different support contacts. So the support contacts are, people that are authorized to initiate support calls. We had 4 people at one time on our team that was able to do the initiating the support calls. But I think we ended up not going with the enterprise support at all, because we decided that we were just going to send people to training and then rely on our own support. But you get everything with that. So they'll help you do remote troubleshooting, performance tuning, which you only get with the platinum and above. So if anybody was, unsure about exactly what they should do with performance tuning, or they find that they need to do that quite often, then yes, they'll help you out with those higher end plans. This pre-compiled Zabbix agents for specific platforms, that basically is a customized installer. So if you have a set of scripts that you want to add, but don't want to spend the time making your own install, these are some of those engineering services that they'll offer to you. The environment review, that again is some of those engineering services that they'll audit your environment. They'll take a look at what you need and what you have, and they'll offer suggestions on what you need to do from there. That's actually a very good service. They helped us out initially determining what topology we needed to use for our monitoring plans that we had. You also get an account manager with the Platinum. They'll do on-site visits. So you'll actually get somebody from Zabbix in Riga, Latvia, that will actually show up and help you out on site. The best value with the Platinum plans and up is that you actually get the user training. So that quote that they give you includes, you can get up to, I think, anywhere between 5 and 10 people on your team can all take a group training session as part of that support plan. You can also purchase the training separately if you just wanted to have the training but not the support. Let's see, and that's yeah. Oh, and the Zabbix Summit, they hold a big summit in Europe every year. They've actually got one going on right now, I believe, that is basically all the Zabbix trainers, Zabbix experts from around the world and from Zabbix themselves start doing a lot of really good presentations on different technologies that are built into and integrated with Zabbix. I watched one earlier today where they talked about how you can use tagging to actually do event correlation and do particular actions on certain items based on what the tag value is. So you don't have to create, a half a dozen templates for, say, a group of web servers running different OSs and different versions of, a web server, whether it be Nginx or Apache. You could use the tagging to your advantage to perform certain restart actions based on, what web server product you're using and what host it's running on, while keeping the same template. So yeah, the global one includes tickets to that, but never been there. I've heard it's nice, at least from what the Zabbix trainer was telling me. But yeah, they do have it. It's not separate from, you don't get a different product. You just get the full support and attention from actual Zabbix employees that are experts in their fields. So, but everything else you need, you can find most of that stuff either in the forums or in the documentation as well.
You mentioned before also, like, it has like, you did Grafana or other things like that you integrated with?
Yeah. What Grafana does, Grafana actually has a Zabbix connector that will connect to the MySQL database and will allow you to just then create your own visualizations. Go ahead and Learn to spell, Bill. Okay. And go ahead and acknowledge that problem. So it'll change that to acknowledge. So that's how you know if somebody's already, worked with the problem. You can actually view the action history too and see who did what on what item. So let me go ahead and pull up the Grafana page. Let's see, Grafana. So like I said, there is a plugin for Grafana that can connect to Zabbix and, make nicer looking visualizations using the data that it pulls in from the MySQL database. I've used this and created, a couple minor dashboards. We also have made some dashboards in Zabbix using custom graphics that we imported that basically will change the graphic based on the item value that is captured. So I have, if you want to visualize this for a minute, I have one dashboard that basically is just a bunch of squares, and these squares change colors based on the value that's being received. So we have them organized into application stacks. So if a critical component in that application stack goes down, you can see that it's either isolated to just an individual component, or it can be an entire application stack will change. And you can click on that graphic and it will take you directly to the latest data for that particular item that is being monitored.
Yeah, kind of process flow by swim lane is what you're
talking about. Exactly. That's pretty much what it looks like. I had to draw it out on paper because when I was explaining it to my team on how I thought it should look, I was like, this is something that management's going to be looking at, so it doesn't need to be very complicated. I was like, let's just do colored boxes with what application it is in that box. And then when you click on that, then you can drill down. I think we had it set to 3 different levels. And if it got to the 3rd level, by that time, you should already be talking to a sysadmin or a DBA anyways about what problem's going on. So we tried to make our dashboards as user-friendly as possible. You could do similar items with, like I said, with Grafana. It just takes some extra, effort to go through and set that up. But it is an option.
So you guys have been using this for a while. How big of deployment do you guys have with Zabbix?
Quite large, and it's actually expanded into Azure and AWS now. We're using it to, we're using a what they refer to as basically like a central Zabbix server with proxies. So individual customers will have a proxy that then reports in over a VPN connection that goes back to our main central Zabbix server. So for like our NOC, we have a central Zabbix dashboard that is pulling data from like 30 different places. And each one of those different sites has a Zabbix proxy that's doing pre-processing of data and sending all that data in large chunks to the main Zabbix dashboard. So we have complete visibility over whatever we want.
So can I ask, because we have a model very similar to that we're using today in Nagios, but it's on the edge of, we did a lot of homebrew stuff in that, and we're looking to kind of replace that. But in that, are you doing all your configuration then for all your customers? Is the NOC doing it in their central one, and then it kind of pushes the configs out to the proxies?
Yes.
Or do you have to go to the proxies? You go to the proxies and do the configurations that you want that want to have done at that location?
Yeah, that goes back to the differences between the active checks and passive checks. So we use all active checks. That's actually the preferred. You'll see in the Zabbix documentation that they say you want to use active checks. And that's usually done with a Zabbix agent. So the Zabbix agent you can install that on a Linux client. You can install it on Windows. You can do, I think, Solaris. Well, actually, I think they dropped Solaris support because it's kind of old now. But let me go back to that page real quick. Solutions. Where was that at? Documentation. So we'll show you here. And they don't get rid of their documentation either. So you can go back all the way to 2.2. And I believe you can actually still get the old 1.0 documentation as well. But we'll stick with the 5.0 for now. And let me go to agents. Where's it at here? All right. So they're suggesting that you use the new Agent 2, especially for Windows systems. But let me go ahead and click on which one do I want? See, this is what I was talking about earlier, that their search engine leaves a little bit to want here. Where's it at here? Zabbix agent. Well, what do I want to look for here? Let's see, agent compatibility. And we'll try this. Where's that? Agent. Okay, well, so that just tells me how it runs as root. Well, let me go back to the installation documentation here. Go to download. I know I can show you all the compatible versions here. So let's go to agent deployment. So right here's all the distributions that are supported. So you got everything from Windows, Linux. Yes, it can do Mac OS as well. And then pretty much anything that's Nix based. So yeah, they still have Solaris there. So I guess they didn't drop support for it. Oh, no, they did for 5.0. So
this is, what you're saying here is, this is passive checks where these are agents that are running that report in their current state.
Yeah, let me pull that documentation up so I can show you here because it'll explain it a little bit better. Because really that comes down to there's some checks that are active, there's some that are passive still, but it depends on what port you have open to. Let me, where is that here?
This kind of, I mean, it looks like a kind of like an NRPE like thing.
Actually, there's a solution that I'm helping replace right now called iSigna.
iChenga, yeah, iChenga, yeah.
And yeah, it's a Nagios clone. We're actually replacing that in a cloud environment with Zabbix. And about 90% of what it's doing is going to be directly translated to Zabbix. Like we won't really have to change a whole lot other than like the agent and maybe adjust some of the scripts.
I guess maybe that's a question. So why would, there's numerous folks out there. There's Nagios, there's iChenga, there's Libra, NMS, there's Zabbix. What was the key differentiators that drove you guys to Zabbix versus, some of the other folks?
A lot of it had to do with its extensibility. That, and there was an API that's pretty well documented, but just the amount of integration that Zabbix has. I mean, I'm sure some of us have used Spiceworks help desk before, right? Okay.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Right. Well, they've got their cloud help desk now, or they've had it for a number of years, but Zabbix announced integration with that just recently, along with like a half a dozen other vendors. It integrates with PagerDuty. You can do webhooks directly into PagerDuty. So if you get an alert that gets generated by a trigger, part of the automation that Zabbix has built in, it can automatically send an alert off to PagerDuty, and PagerDuty, will take care of your escalation path based off the information that Zabbix gathers. And And then, of course, since Zabbix has an API, say you acknowledge the alert in PagerDuty, that sends information back into the through the API for Zabbix, and you can have it open or close or acknowledge the alert based on that workflow. We were told that we can actually do the same thing with System Center. I'm probably going to butcher the name here, but I think it's called Incident Manager. It might have been whatever CRM help desk solution they have from Microsoft right now. But there was a way that you could actually send email requests in from Zabbix and have it parse and everything and create tickets based on that. I mean, I'll show you here in a second because there's it's just amazing how much extensibility. When they say it's scalable and extensible, they're not kidding. There's a lot of stuff that you can roll Zabbix into. But yeah, so passive and active checks. So passive checks, just a simple data request. So say for example, like the CPU load, that's something that you could pull with SNMP. So that would be, the basic, check. You don't need to have anything else like running in the background. So the active check is like when you need to parse, like do some string parsing. So if you have a log file that you're looking at, that would be something that an active check would be working with and parsing. So here's some of the server response for it. It'd say, hey, here's the max log time or log size, last log size, yada, yada. So with a passive check, you're only going to get just like very, very basic, simple data. You'll see those referred to as just simple checks all the time. So if you didn't want to deploy agents to everything, then that's all you would get. You would get simple checks like, okay, basic ping test, a basic, SNMP string. You wouldn't get anything like a service related check. So you couldn't tell if an FTP service was up. Now you could tell if the FTP port was on. So that's pretty much what that big difference between the two is. So if you're wanting to get more, like rich data from your endpoints, you'll want to use the agent active checks. And you can customize those too. So when you deploy the agent has a configuration file just like the Zabbix server does. You can pre-compile that with all the settings that you want, host names and all that. So if you're doing like an automatic discovery, instead of going through and manually creating all the hosts you want to look at, you can just say, okay, well, I'm going to, I know I need to monitor workstations or servers, but as part of that imaging process, I already have my Zabbix agent installed and the configuration file is already set exactly how I want it, or I'm going to deploy it through group policy like that. Basically, all you do is copy that configuration file over using, group policy or Ansible or whatever, configuration management tool you want. And you restart the service and those changes take effect immediately. And then on the polling interval that Zabbix server does, it'll go out and it'll crawl your network and find those hosts and automatically pull them in. You can have it set up to where it'll put them in, automatically into certain groups. You can perform certain actions on them. There's a lot of little things that you can do. It's a little bit more out of scope than what I want to dive into at the moment.
I get that. That's fine. I just wanted to see what the options were.
Yes. Let me go ahead. I'm going to put this link in the chat window as well. I did not expect anybody to ask me about active passive checks. So thank you.
We're full of unknowns here.
So yeah, I didn't put any of that in my notes, but I'll do that for next time. So yeah, just remember, if you want to deploy the agent, you're going to be doing active checks. If you don't deploy an agent, you're only going to have passive checks, and passive checks are very limited. So let me go back. Someone mentioned security. Let's see here. I believe there was a whole section on that. So You can, if you don't want to use like local logins, you can actually set this up to do HTTP authentication, or you can set it up for Active Directory authentication. That's actually what we use. We use Active Directory authentication, and it's all the process to set that up is right here. It's actually fairly easy to do. You just tell, where your LDAP server's at, and you can begin creating users to have access to your particular Zabbix installation. And all that again is covered in the documentation. We wanted to go to, let's see, what else did I have here? Okay. So there's a whole bunch of best practices too, listed in each version of the documentation. So since we're on 5.0, it's the basics. So principal of least privilege. So say I wanted to create a user, I had a help desk user that I wanted to have access to Zabbix to do basic, basic problem acknowledge and information gathering. So we can just go here to users, and I can say, let's go create user. We'll just call this B. Okay. Okay, and we'll add Justin to just guest mode. I didn't create any other groups yet, but we'll do that here in a second. So you can give them a password, just do password again. Justin's not British last I checked, but since I didn't add any other languages to my server, that's all I've got access to at the moment is just Great Britain English. So you can tell them, say, okay, we want them to have a dark theme, no auto login. You can set up your dashboards to refresh every 30 seconds, or we can say, I want everything to refresh every 10 seconds. You can tell it, say, I want to show 100 rows per page. And you can even dump them off to another URL after they log off or after they log in. So permissions, let's go up here. You can see by default, it's just a Zabbix user, but you can do admin. Admin doesn't have access to everything, but it allows them to do some things. So we'll just let them, keep them as a Zabbix user for right now. Media, you can say, okay, if I'm going to set up Justin to do alerts, here we're going to touch on some of the integration. So you can send alerts directly to a Discord channel. You can do email. You can do HTML email now. If you use Jira Service Desk, that's already built in. You can say, I want to send to a Jira Service Desk, type the address that you want to send it to, and which level of severities you want to be notified about. PagerDuty is already there. OTRS, if anybody's used that, that integration's already there. ServiceNow, I know some of you use ServiceNow, so you could actually have webhooks into that. Signal 4, I don't know of anybody that actually uses that, but it looked kind of cool. You can do plain old text messages, send it out to an SMS server. Use Telegram. I know Telegram is pretty big in the open source arena for communication, and it's even got Zendesk as well. Mattermost is another one that I've seen people starting to use, but MS Teams was actually one of the big things that they integrated in 5.0. So if you have a Teams channel that's got an email address assigned to it, you can put that email address in here. You can say, hey, notify me 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, or you could say, hey, only send alerts to this channel between the hours of 9 and 5 p.m. or 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And you only want to know if, oh my God, everything is burning kind of alerts. So if you guys spend, a lot of time in Teams or Slack, there you go. You have an alerting system that's not email based. I saw, kind of going off on a tangent here, going back to Microsoft Teams, and this would translate to Slack as well. But Microsoft actually had a video at, I want to say I was at Ignite this year, where they talked about how they do escalations within Microsoft, and that's what they do. They have their monitoring and alerting systems. Instead of sending emails, they send alerts to a Teams channel, and they're able to instantly start collaborating and troubleshooting those problems as they come in, and they get a full end-to-end kind of analysis that they can use. So they can go back and replay the entire event and see what was done, who was doing what, and take all that information and basically put it into their knowledge base, which was really kind of a novel of use of combining alerting and those team-like channels. So just something to think about. But enough of that. So let's go ahead and create a user. And then I'm going to log out and log back in just to show you that, Justin doesn't have access to anything that I currently have access to as the admin. So go ahead and sign out. And we'll go in Justin B, password, sign in. And we should see, oh, hang on a second here.
Well, this obviously isn't real because I would never give you my password.
Yeah. So
We'd have to kill you then. So
David might fire me if I did that.
let's see here. Go back to administration, users. I forgot the password already. Can you believe that? Man, I feel like I got the memory span of a goldfish at times.
It's obviously password.
Yeah, unless I couldn't spell, which wouldn't be the first time tonight. Okay. P-A-S-S-A. Oops, see, I already screwed up. O-R-D. And we'll update it. Now we'll try it again. It's probably also had to do too with case sensitivity with the usernames. And there we go. So you see here, I've customized the view. So we've got a dark mode. We've got no problems going on right now. And you'll see I've got a severely reduced set of things I can look at. I have no configuration, no administration, but I can look at inventory. Let's go out here. No host groups. Oh, that's right, because I don't have inventory enabled on those. That's why. Hosts. Oh, I don't even have permission set up for the host groups. Look at that. So you've got availability reports too that you can look at, which since I don't have anything here, I don't have access to anything because I didn't set up access to any of the other groups. So you can trim access down quite a bit actually. So let's go ahead and sign out. Go back in as admin. Users. So yeah, I should have had all groups on there. I don't know why that didn't show anything. Something I'll have to look at, but I think I'm going a little long here. So am I answering questions sufficiently or still leaving people hanging?
You're doing great.
Okay. To go back to and talk a little bit more about the network monitoring, you can do pretty much anything. If you can touch it with SNMP, you can pull you can pull metrics for any networking equipment. Doesn't matter if it's a switch, router, firewall. If you can connect to SNMP, you can pull data. Side note, if you use something like pfSense, pfSense actually has a Zabbix agent that you can enable through their little add-on store that they have built in. So you can actually have a Zabbix agent just installed already on your pfSense firewall and configure it to point to Zabbix, and it'll start feeding active check data on that VM guest, along with all the networking information for bandwidth in and out and other firewall status, which is pretty neat. Let me see. So yeah, there's a tutorial right there on Tech Experts to get that up and running using the agents that's built into pfSense. So share Zabbix. And if you look out here on share.zabbix.com, here you can find pre-built templates as well. So if you don't want to go through the hassle of making your own template, you can come out here to Zabbix Share and look up, say, let's go network devices. And pick your poison. We've got a lot of people that use Ubiquity, right? So there's 14 templates that people have shared for Ubiquity devices. So you can go out here, look at Unify or Unify Controller. Let's try that one. So somebody made a controller monitor that you can mine all of this data directly out of your Unify system. So all of these will translate out to items that you can build trigger alerts for, and even inventory some of those systems. So they've got low-level discoveries, agent discoveries, agent active, and then custom scripts. So looks like somebody left some, yeah. That's something you always run into too, is that, you know, everybody's always asking, I wish there was some better instructions. You'll see that quite a bit. Some of it is just, you have to go and you have to go back to the Zabbix documentation, find it, and just kind of play around with it and then make your own documentation. Because sometimes people will write these templates, but then they don't, you know, they don't share any documentation with it, which I think is unfortunate. But, you know, that doesn't mean that they don't work. It just means you have to spend a little bit of time figuring out all the possibilities for yourself. But they've got, I'm pretty sure a lot of us have used FortiGate appliances, probably some Brocade or Checkpoint solutions. So you've got pre-built FortiGate SNMP templates. You can go out and grab those and say, okay, it's going to collect all this information. So serial number, OS version, connection number, CPU RAM metrics, which again, those would be like passive checks, because we're pulling it through SNMP, and interface information. And then they also, gave you graphs that you can use. Same thing you'll see with Brocade. Brocade's going to have a lot of the same capabilities. Come on, click on that link. How am I doing on time here? Oh, okay. Apologize if I'm going a little long here. Just feel free to tell me to shut up when you're ready. Click on databases here. So there's different databases that you can get templates for, Elasticsearch, MongoDB, different MySQL monitors. There's a lot of different things that you can do on here. Oh, I'm sure somebody would be interested in this, telephony. So there you go. You could probably find things that you could switch or check in here for different IP phone systems or whatnot.
So actually, this just brought up a question. SNMP traps. So you're talking about all active polling, and there's a lot of devices out there with certain data is only available via trap. How does this handle traps?
It's basically in your server config. There's an option for SNMP trappers. You basically just enable those and then configure your triggers and items properly. You can use, you go back, you can use different macros that have, particular items that you want to look at. It just really kind of just depends on what you're looking for.
Okay.
It's all stuff that you can define in the actual item configuration.
It supports it. That's all that really matters.
But yeah, I mean, they've got templates in here for SCADA, IoT, home automation. If anybody listens to any of the Jupiter broadcasting podcasts, one of the hosts is huge fan of home automation, and they do a lot of that stuff. I forget the platform they're using for it, but you could turn around and you could use Zabbix to monitor all that equipment as well. So different operating systems, of course, it's pretty much a given. Pretty much anything that's Windows, Linux based. You can monitor UPSs, printers, virtualization, of course, what we're talking about here. So there's not really anything there that you couldn't touch. They also have low-level discovery. So if there's something you find that doesn't have a template or doesn't have any clear documentation on how you can obtain data from it, usually the rule is, as long as you can connect to it with a network connection, you probably can do a low-level discovery and pull some kind of information out of it. You just pretty much have to be able to connect to it. So when all else fails, there's always low-level discoveries that you can begin to configure. Let's see here. I believe when I was in training, the gentleman that was doing our training said they actually had a customer. I want to say it was either Germany or Norway. One of those two had a retailer that they just wanted to pull a particular item off of one model of POS system that they had, and it was basically like a signature pad. And they used low-level discoveries to connect to the signature pad to pull a error code from the signature pad. So if it ever threw that particular error, it would go back through, put it in the Zabbix dashboard as a problem, and they ran through a ServiceNow workflow to actually get a tech assigned to that particular account to get out and replace a signature pad. But it was pretty cool how they did that whole integration. So yeah, that's where you can get all your templates from. I forgot to put that in my documentation. So let me go ahead and put that in the chat window as well. All right, any more questions?
All right. It's a great discussion. Thanks for presenting, Bill. That was great information. I have it set up in my lab now and play around with it. So I think it was very beneficial.
Yeah, like I said, it's a good platform. It's very extensible. That was one last thing I was going to do. Let me bring that up here. Zabbix integration. So there's the entire list. Again, I'll put this in the chat window. So all the vendors that they list here, they have capabilities to monitor. So the official built-in templates, pretty much everything you can touch here. So we got Brocade capabilities right out of the box, Cisco capabilities, Jira, Mattermost, Nginx, Netgear, pretty much all the major brands. that you'd run across in a normal operations environment. Virtual machines, of course, pretty much anything that's a hypervisor it can touch. So again, this is one of those things where, you know, some monitoring products will not have even a third of these listed that it's able to connect. So going back to the whole thing, why did we choose Zabbix? You're looking at it right here. That's why we went with it. Just because it didn't really have too many things that it couldn't touch and couldn't pull data from. So with that, I'll go ahead and end my presentation and turn it back over to you guys.
Awesome. Good stuff. All right. The only other thing we've got to do is the drawing. So I got a handy dandy little website that will do our drawing for us. So those with their names on there multiple times are the ones that had their cameras on, at least most of the time. So there we go. Again, you'll have your choice of where you want to get the gift card from. I guess it'll probably be within reason of whether I can order it or not. So, but. First winner is Kent. So,
Yay!
so I'll get with you after the or at the end here and
no problem.
find out where you want to have the gift card for and where you want it sent to.
Okay.
And for the second one, oh, Ben. And Ben had to drop off this a little bit early because his wife's sick, so we'll get him.
Next time he won by a pixel.
Literally. Sorry, Jeremy. That was really close.
The wheel has spoken.
The wheel has spoken. Yeah. I do have something for when we get back together in person that we had created. I don't have them totally completed, but hang on, let me turn my background off. It's breaking this really bad. Oh, didn't click that.
It looked like a nice, really nice, like holographic card. I was kind of impressed.
Right? No virtual background. Okay. So it'll be a keychain. So I'll put a keychain on the end of that, and so we'll be handing those out.
Great for server room keys.
Yeah. Yeah, we had some made for work too. Justin, you weren't supposed to know that yet, but there's one we had made for work. So actually, I think Justin, you already knew, maybe. So Sticker Mule had a sale a couple weeks ago where you got 50 of them for like $29. So I bought a bunch of them for different things. All right. All right, so Kent, I'll message you directly on that.
Okay.
I don't think I have contact information outside of this, and you're not on our Slack, correct?
I think I am. Let me see if I was on there at one time from one of the events. I'm not normally sitting on it. Let me see if I can log in.
You don't sit on it like the rest of us do?
I'm sorry. I got too many people in our own organization that love to beat me up on Slack. Let me see. It doesn't stop dinging all day.
That's okay. We can do it through here. But so okay. Does anybody else have anything they want to discuss before we call it a night?
I just want to add real quick too, if anybody's got any feedback on presentation, hit me up, let me know. I'm open to criticism, compliments, whatever. something I like doing. I constantly want to get better at it, and maybe you can even give me an idea for something else you want to talk about at a future event, and I'll see if I can make a presentation about it. So that's it for me.
Well, thanks, Bill. You've been talking about it quite a bit for the last 2 years, so I'm glad to finally see it.
Yep, very good. And we did record tonight, so I will, although I don't think I got the last one posted yet that we did, not last month's, but one prior to that. I keep forgetting about it. I have it downloaded. But anyways, we'll get it posted so you can go back and watch it. Maybe I'll just put out the link to everybody here and then get the final one edited before I put it onto YouTube. So just the front and the back of it, we typically pull off the dead air. So. All right.
I have a quick question for Bill, if there's a couple minutes left.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
Bill, so when you pointed the Zabbix to the ESXi host, can you also point it to VCSA, or is there any restrictions on that?
No, I believe you can. It's just a matter of just giving your VCSA address and doing the same thing. So using the username, password, and that URL to the SDK. So I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, the VCSA, does it have that SDK URL as well? Or is it something you have to install separately? Because I only anticipated the ESXi host. I didn't account for VCSA.
Yeah, I can give it a try. And if it doesn't work with the SDK, I guess there's probably some documentation somewhere.
Yeah. Now I do know that one of the items that was configured or configurable was it will check to see if that host is a part of a cluster. So maybe it's just it automatically pulls that information in when you connect to one of them, and it knows that it's a part of a cluster. I don't know. I've only got the one host here monitored, and unfortunately, I don't actually monitor any of the hosts like that in my work environment at the moment. So I can't really speak to that for sure or not. I just know that I can definitely do ESXi hosts.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep.
I can't tell if it does or not. When I go to it, it doesn't pull anything up, but doesn't mean there isn't one. There probably is one somewhere.
Yeah, it'd be one of those things that if you go out to the documentation, just do a quick search for VCSA and see if it comes up with something in the 5.0 documentation.
Okay.
It looks like we got a new participant. And he's waving at us all. All right. Well, unless anybody has any other questions or whatever, we will call it a night. It's VW or FWVMUG. That's what it is. For Slack. Yeah, just fwvmug.slack.com is the URL.
All right. Well, thanks again, everybody, for letting me present again. And you guys have a wonderful evening. All right.
All right. Talk to you guys later.
Have a good evening.
Later, everyone.